I ignored about 1,000 red flags and bought seeds for a very rare plant from some random guy in Yemen who only accepted cryptocurrency for payment. Sounds like a scam, right? Well, it wasn't, but it very well could have been. And here's the plant that I grew from those seeds, the very rare Dorstenia gigas ballata. But how did I know that it wasn't a scam? We'll break that down a little bit later. For today, I want to help you guys avoid falling into 3 of the biggest traps that you can find when buying plants and seeds online. Number 1, those rare plant listings. Overpriced plants labelled as rare when really they're not. Number 2, actual scammers who are out to fleece you of your money and give you nothing in return. And number 3, poached plants, avoiding plants that have been ripped straight out of habitat. And we turn now to eBay Australia. I have a bit of a dig through some of the cactus and succulent listings, and what you're going to find is almost exclusively they're listed as rare, whether or not they really are. It's a very clever marketing ploy to create a sense of scarcity. You know, if they're rare, then they're hard to get. If they're hard to get, maybe they should be worth more, or maybe you should be buying them this very instant. I know for a fact that when I first started out, I bought a few plants erroneously looking back that were labelled rare. Really shouldn't have bought them. But where it becomes problematic is where we find plants that not only are they labelled rare, their price tag is severely inflated despite the fact that they're not actually rare plants. I can see here 2 plants, Euphorbia buplerifolia and Euphorbia obesa, listed for $125 and $105 respectively. That is a vast overestimation of their worth in the Australian market. How do I know? Because I've got plenty of them myself. Sometimes I even sell them. Euphorbia obesa, commonly known as a baseball plant. Usually this is a $15 to $20 plant. And buplerifolia can fetch a higher price, up to maybe $45 if the plant's big enough. But certainly, under no circumstance, unless they're very old or very mature specimens, would they ever reach a price over $100. Certainly not like those 2 plants. So how do we avoid falling into this trap? Well, a little bit of research goes a long way. If you head into the sold listing sections of eBay, you can actually see the prices that these plants have been fetching. And going on here, we can see that typically sales of these plants have ranged from $10, $12.50, $27, I suppose it's a little bit higher, but certainly nothing even remotely approaching that $105 mark, which, in my opinion, utterly insane. So, do your research, know the plants you're buying, and avoid overpaying for plants that are labelled as rare. Now, the second dangerous trap we want to avoid falling into is actual scammers. Scam websites, scam sellers on social media, that sort of thing. People who are out to take your money and give you nothing in return, or some vastly inferior product that you never actually wanted in the first place. When it comes to succulent websites, what I've found is one of the easiest ways to note whether they're legitimate or not is if they're actually offering plants, grown live plants for sale, because often they're seed sellers, and when you sell seeds, it's very hard to delineate between plant A and plant B unless you're really an expert. Very easy to get ripped off and sent something that isn't what you ordered. If you go onto the website, like here's one here, and if I have a look at their seeds, they've got a million different seeds, but, for example, going into their plant catalogue, they've got a lot of plants for sale, but mysteriously, they've all been sold out. When it comes to their seeds, however, they're all available, even seeds for plants that would disappear almost instantaneously because they're so rare on the market. It becomes a matter of, is it too good to be true? And if the answer to that question is yes, it probably is too good to be true. So, you know, proceed with caution. There are a few other things that you can do to try and find out whether or not you're buying from someone legitimate. If a website provides an actual business address, there's a very good chance that it's legitimate. Not always, but the chances are higher. You can have a look here, clicking on the contact page, you just get some generic contact form. However, if I go somewhere that I know is legitimate, we can see A very stark difference indeed. This is a website called Lifestyle Seeds. They're located in South Africa. They don't just sell seeds, they sell plants as well. You can have a look, go into their shop, browse by their category. You can see, for example, live succulents. Let's see what they've got for sale right now. Some adeniums, some agaves, some aloes. These are all plants actually for sale and they're not sold out. Then, if I go to customer support and click on contact us, what are you going to find? But an actual real life physical address where the business is located. They're legitimate, they exist, and they're not going to rip you off. So, there are a couple of the steps you can take. Of course, if you're dealing with a private seller on somewhere like Facebook or Instagram, due diligence is the way to go. Ask around, find out if other people have got any experience with that seller, and if they do, what their feelings were like. Was it a positive transaction? Was it a negative transaction? How quick did the plants arrive? Did they even arrive at all? Ask those questions and especially consider what sort of payments they accept. If they're accepting PayPal, but only friends and family, if they're only accepting crypto, or they're accepting something like minimise, or any of those cash transfer systems, red alarms should be going off in your head. Avoid, avoid, avoid. Paying by PayPal through a business system, that allows you to get a refund if you get scammed. There's a very well-known scammer who works in the Australian context, who one time, quite sillily I suppose, I sent a bit of money, unaware that he was a scammer at the time, for a bunch of plants. They never showed up. I kept asking, where are they? I kept getting excuses. Eventually, I did get my money back. You want to know how? I threatened to call the police on him. I filled out an online scam form and said, hey, I've done this, I'm about to send it to the police. I got my money back within about 6 hours. So if you do fall victim to a scam, don't be afraid to contact the authorities as well, because often that'll scare the absolute daylights out of them. And the last trap that we want to avoid falling into when we're buying plants online is buying poached plants. Plants that have been ripped straight out of habitat, contributing, I suppose, to the degradation of our natural environment. Not a very pretty scene whatsoever. Now, there are a few ways to recognise a plant if it's been poached. The first of these is if it's got a certain character, a certain patina that comes from a very harsh life out in the environment. But that's no guarantee. For example, this is a Cadrostis africana, and you can see, loaded with character. It's got this massive hole in it where it's recovered from a bout of rot. How do I know this wasn't poached? Because I know where it came from. I know the provenance of it. I know the person who raised it from a very young age. So if that's not the way to identify a poached plant, what is? Often price will be the indicator, because a very old, gnarly, characterful plant in cultivation will have been with a grower for decades, if not passed down through generations. And with time comes significant price. Poachers, on the other hand, work in scale. They'll denude an environment of many of its plants all in one hit because they just want to offload them quickly and cheaply. And so if you're buying a very old plant for a very low price relatively, there's a good chance that it's been taken from habitat. Whereas those plants that have got character and a very high price tag attached, well, you do the sums. There are some species that are a little bit more prone to this, in particular your Stephanias from Southeast Asia, some of the Copiopoas from South America, and Conophytums and Cordiciform plants from the Africas. I would say that if you're working in that space with old plants, just do your research and be aware of the provenance of that particular plant. Ignorance is a reasonable excuse. You can't change your behaviour if you don't know about it. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to let people know so they can avoid falling into this particular trap, because anything that degrades these plants in natural habitat is a loss for all of us, right? So back to that guy in Yemen. How on earth did I know that it wasn't actually a scam, despite all of the millions of red flags that should have said to me, run away as fast as you can? Well, pretty simple really. I just did my research. I reached out to a few different growers who I thought maybe had contacted him in the past. They said positive things, and away we go. It's as simple as that. Doing a little bit of background research can go a very long way and save you a lot of heartache and also a hole in your bank balance. If you're still watching at this point, hit subscribe, hit like, buy a t-shirt. I appreciate all the support every single day. It blows my mind. Anyway, that's it for another week of Aridzine. I hope it's been interesting. I hope you've learned something that's going to help you avoid falling into any of the traps that I know I have personally fallen into myself over the years. Until next time, happy growing.